The biggest thing, well, no, not really. The second biggest thing this week that technically has come up since we've last talked is the college football playoff format is going to be different. Everybody remembers how it was last year. Teams got automatic buys based off of who was higher ranked, and the structure was really bad. Now, the college football playoff has come up with a new solution that the top 4 teams will have the seeding. There's still automatic qualifiers, however, in the new college football playoff format. However, they are going to seed everybody based off of who they would be ranked as. There's no Boise State jumping, Arizona State jumping. They have changed that. Joe, I kind of freaked out when this was passed because it's the first step of being realistic here, right? Like, it would have been 2 SEC teams, 2 Big Ten teams that would have had the 4 spots, and that would have been the teams that deserved to be in there. When you look at the new college football playoff format, your thoughts?
Well, this is something that we screamed about a lot at the end of the year when the seeds were coming out, the bracket was being built. We were really frustrated with the way that it was being put together. And I think that the on-field result was very clear that the way that they had it was a mess. It was the wrong approach. I give them credit. I didn't think that they would move this quickly. Like, I'm really surprised that it has been a weird offseason for things and solutions being presented and actually enacted. I'm very shocked that this came through as quickly as it did. I want to just put into context as we talk about this, what last year's playoff would have looked like. So very quickly, 12 Clemson would have faced 5 Notre Dame, who would have saw number 4 Penn State. Number 9 Boise State would have took on number 8 Indiana, who would have faced number 1 Oregon. Number 11 ASU would have faced number 6 Ohio State. They would face the winner, or the winner of that would face number 3 Texas. And then 10 SMU would have faced 7 Tennessee. Winner would go on to play number 2 Georgia. So those top 4 seeds would have been Oregon, Texas, Georgia, and Penn State. And I think that we all could agree that bracket probably would have produced a very similar result because we ended up with very similar matchups. But those first-round games would have been a lot more entertaining. There are not a lot of bad matchups that are presented here. You know, you get the chance to Tennessee to rematch with Georgia, and they probably would have smoked SMU, but we would have gotten another week at Tennessee. Arizona State, who knows if they could have put up a little bit of a fight the way that they did against Texas, but Ohio State probably would have advanced and still faced Texas.
I know, probably.
Right. I think that the biggest piece that we can see here, if we revisited last year's bracket and changed it to the new format, all of those games are a lot more entertaining. All of the secondary games would have also been a lot more entertaining as well.
Well, it also states that for once, common sense has entered the room.
Yes.
I mean, like common sense has finally entered the room here in the sense of, Joe, 10-2 Penn State, for all the flaws that they have, is not created equal to 10-2 Arizona State. It just isn't. It like legitimately isn't. And we forgot that. 10-2 Georgia, even though they did get the bye, is not equal to what we saw from a team in Boise State in the schedule that they faced. Joe, you're talking about one team that was 80th in the country in strength of schedule versus the number 1. Both of those were created buys. Both of those teams had bye weeks. If you're Indiana and Tennessee here, you're probably saying to yourself, excuse me? What are you doing? Why didn't you do this for us? So I had to go, if I'm Tennessee, I had to go up to Columbus because of your stupid seeding and take on the national champion when I could have had a playoff game against somebody that I could have beaten, and no telling what would have happened. All I'm saying here is, for once, common sense has come into the building. Joe, listen, we have taken some, not a lot, but we've taken some heat for being a little bit too Big Ten SEC-esque. No shit we have. No shit.
We're in favor of good football. I mean.
No, well, we also are understanding what those teams are going through. Right? Like, okay, Ohio State went 10-2. They played in a month a tougher schedule than anybody that got a bye outside of Georgia. Outside of Georgia. Like, what are we talking about here? Penn State was in the Big Ten title game, Joe. SMU. You're putting Boise State in a bye situation over Penn State. Do you understand how dumb that is? That is dumb. Now, Joe, I still don't agree. If you're at the table, I still don't agree with the auto qualifiers. I don't. I don't. And listen, we're gonna kind of get to that in just a minute. Greg Sankey currently is at the podium for SEC spring meetings going off. If anybody's following Ross Dellinger on Twitter right now, he's going stupid. So I'm glad for once common sense entered the room. But if you were at the table, you could have done some other things too. Joe, this is how I would equate it. I feel as if that, you know how when you're in business, they tell you don't leave money on the table, so to speak. Like if somebody's trying to send you hints saying, I'll buy this too, don't walk away from the table. Why not go with the 12 best teams? Why not?
Okay. This is where you can't. I will not agree with you on this part. The auto bids are a fine premise. There are 12 teams that get into the playoff. We are talking about 5 designated spots in the playoff, 4 for the power conferences, 1 G5 spot that are allowed to participate. I think that because of how diverse scheduling is across the sport, that we don't get enough opportunities for teams in the Big Ten to play against the SEC or the ACC to play against the Big 12 or whatever it is to produce comparison points. Because we don't have that, we need to have some sort of an auto bid. If you win your conference, you deserve the right to go and participate. And I think that Arizona State was a good example of an unexpectedly good team. You know, a team that didn't have the same level of talent, but was well coached and scratched and clawed and fought and almost came back and won a game over a team that made it to the Final Four team.
How many years is that going to happen? Because I have a decade's worth of those exact teams being blown out.
How many years is it going to happen that the Big 12 champion and the ACC champion is like complete ass, like 3-4 losses and has no right to be there? I don't think that's going to happen.
Clemson did have 3 losses.
Didn't they finish the year with 3 losses, or did they have 3 losses?
They had 4 losses. They lost to Georgia, they lost to Louisville, and they lost to South Carolina. Their 4th loss was against Texas.
Well, that Clemson team was better than the SMU team that ended up getting in, but that was
But you understand what I'm saying?
Issue. That was a separate issue, though.
Again, hold on. This is why I'm saying it. Just stay with me. Please, just stay with me. We had a debate with two 9-3 teams at the end of the season. South Carolina and Clemson. They played on the field, and it meant nothing. But because one won a conference, we just going to throw them in there. It doesn't matter. Joe, the game was played on the field. It did. Joe, we got to a place where a game in South Carolina and Clemson happened, and it did not matter.
The mistake that they made, though, was putting SMU in that doesn't have anything to do with Clemson in my eyes. Clemson was able to go on in their conference and prove that they were the best team in their conference. And I understand. Like, I don't have an argument against the fact that they went head-to-head with South Carolina and they lost. But the problem is the committee should have been smart enough to decide and say South Carolina was better than the ACC champion. We should have pulled out SMU because SMU had done nothing to prove that they belonged. And it was that stupid logic of we can't take a team out because they lost in their conference championship game. Or I think that's total nonsense because the conference championship game is supposed to be a proving point for teams that had easy schedules and that needed that extra week to actually define who they were.
There's 2 things with that. The problem in that logic would be, well, South Carolina lost the 2 teams that were ahead of them, Ole Miss and Bama. So again, we're trying to split hairs on something that is uneven. But my whole premise is that for once we legitimately saw a game that got played on the field and it meant nothing. They beat the ACC champion. Now, I will say this. Later on in the show, we're going to talk about what Greg Sankey and the SEC and the Big Ten fighting with the NCAA and other conferences, because Greg Sankey has just taken shots at the ACC and the Big 12 3 times in less than 10 minutes. As we're currently speaking, Joe, he's not wrong.
No.
He is not wrong here. I've taken more shots at Greg Sankey than anyone. Umpiring, scheduling, all of it. He's not wrong here. You were at the table, but they're trying to communicate on how they want to do this. How about we make it all even? The best teams get in. And that was, again, and I know that we don't agree there. And look, I understand it. But I also want the game with Clemson and South Carolina to mean something. I don't think it's fair to look at South Carolina in the face and say, hey, you beat the ACC champion, but just because they're in a different conference than you, it doesn't mean anything.
My problem with your premise of just put the best teams in is most to do with that it's not as simple as that for me. I think on paper, just that statement alone, if it was written into a rule, the 12 best teams, the 16 best teams get into the college football playoff. If that was what was written and it was just put out there, makes total sense. But we're not producing an NFL style playoff. There are not 32 teams that are vying for the opportunity to compete for a national title. Most of the G5 is not really competing, so we're going to ignore them in this conversation. There's 70 something teams amongst the power conferences that have to put together competitive schedules to prove that they're good enough. I think that the last two teams in every year for a 12-team and a 16-team playoff, maybe more than that, but at the bare minimum, the last two teams in, there's going to be question marks. There's going to be. At least winning your conference should mean something, though.
But yeah.
Then get rid of the conference championships is my whole point. If it doesn't mean anything, just get rid of them.
Well, then get rid of in-season games because per Greg Sankey, the ACC and Big 12 said that they proposed a 4-4-3-3-1 model.
That I don't agree with. That one I don't agree with.
Okay,
I think that's wrong.
But then if you don't agree with that, then you agree that those conferences shouldn't have 6 teams combined in a 16-team playoff.
Wait. So-
and no, they don't. They don't. The ACC and Big Ten do not have 6 teams that deserve to be in a 16-team playoff. They don't. They both have 2 teams that are good enough each to throw into a 16-team playoff. And all I am saying is, and hell, you know what? Let's fight for Illinois while we're at it. Illinois, because you use this logic all the time. Illinois beat them in a bowl game, even though let's not. I actually don't use this logic that often. I think that I get lumped in with the general Big Ten crowd, and I'm not like a Big Ten homer or anything. Regardless, Illinois beats South Carolina. South Carolina beats Clemson. Like, this is the whole fight that we're over. And guess what we're doing here? Guess what we're doing? Because we're trying to appease everybody based off of what happened last year, what's happening right now, even though you and I agree with what just happened. Joe, correct? Me and you agree that we're glad that last year's playoff model got changed, correct?
Yes, extremely happy.
Now we're fighting about more expansion because other teams that do not win the titles are bitching about it. That correct me if I'm wrong.
But I think that's not what it's truly about. Yes, it is. They're complaining because they want more equal representation. They don't want the SEC.
They don't deserve it.
But forget that for a second. The most important talking point is there's no right way to seed it. Seed's the wrong word. There's no right way to create who gets into the playoff or not. There are flaws to every argument. I think the least flawed argument is that if your team plays through their conference schedule, is good enough to get into a conference championship game and then win their conference championship game, that to me is an important point. That to me is an important point of success. When we talk about program success.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, when we talk about program success, we talk about conference championships.
Yes, we do. However, when that conference champion is getting beat by a team on the bubble in the last game of the season, it's a problem for me. And I'll always have a problem with that. We don't have to agree there. But this is not the last time that will happen. It's not. So as an example, we're bringing up Clemson. If Clemson loses to LSU and or South Carolina again this year, and either one of those teams are on the bubble, what if you're Greg Sankey, what do you say then?
Last year was a complete anomaly, though. we need to remind ourselves that it was a year in the ACC where Florida State was comically bad, and Miami would have been one of the representatives for the ACC, probably would have been in over SMU, but because they shit their pants at the end of the year, they didn't make it in. Miami would have put up a much bigger fight than what SMU did against Penn State. I stand by that. They would have put up a bigger
fight than what Clemson would have done. I would have much rather seen Cam Ward go out there and try to ball out than them.
I'm bringing that up to say that it was a historically down year for the ACC. It is not a conference that has poor branding. They have brands that are rising in the current era of college football.
Brands mean nothing when the games are played on the field and someone's getting
but that's not what I'm saying, Blake. I'm saying that in the future there are still going to be a lot of competitive teams in the ACC. Last year, we know historically is not an example of what the ACC typically does. There are going to be at least 2 to 3 ACC teams that are worthy of the discussion. Most years, there are going to be years where conferences have down years. And I know that you would love to counter with the Big 12.
Here's the problem with your logic of what you just said. Can I tell you what it is?
What?
South Carolina beat Clemson 2 of the last 3 years.
Okay.
So you say it's an anomaly. No, it's not.
But that has nothing to do with what I was just talking about.
But yes, it is. Because again, you said that it's an anomaly because we expanded the playoff and that game didn't really matter for the team that got in.
That's not what I said. Okay. I'm saying that it is an anomaly that the ACC was as weak as it was. Because
Joe, who was the second best team 2 years ago when Florida State was in there? It was Louisville. Louisville had 4 losses.
No, they didn't. No, they didn't.
They played Louisville in the ACC championship game. Yes, they did.
They definitely did not.
Okay. Yes, they did, but okay. Who did they play, Joe?
They finished 10-4 in their bowl game, though. Their bowl game was the final loss that they suffered.
Who did they play?
They played USC in their bowl game. And
No. Who did Florida State play in the ACC championship game?
They played Louisville, but Louisville finished with 4 losses after their
Clemson did. So again, you're making the argument that these teams in the ACC and Big 12 deserve what?
But that's not the 2023 was a very different year than
because you had an expanded playoff. Joe, Louisville would have been in.
But you didn't have a team as good as Florida State last year.
Who's we?
I didn't say we. You would not have had. There would not. Florida State was a 12-0 undefeated team.
Sure.
Okay.
I'm not fighting over Florida State.
There was not a good enough. There was not a team that was that good in the ACC this year. My point that I'm trying to make is that the teams that are typically good in the ACC were bad last season. They were not up to standard.
A team like Louisville, just like SMU did this year. All I'm saying is it's the same logic of SMU getting into the playoff. You can't penalize a team that went into their ACC conference championship game and lost. And I will bring you up the tweets of big-time media people that cover college football saying SMU should not be penalized based off of them losing a conference championship game. That was the talking point.
I don't disagree with that.
You have had the same talking point for Louisville, who got beat by Kentucky. So, again, every time you bring up this, go look it up. I'll wait again. It's Sports Jeopardy on Ruffino and Joe show right now.
You're right. They did lose to Ray.
Yes. Again, what are we talking about? There comes a premise where we keep saying that there's an anomaly going on. The fuck there is an anomaly, and I'm not taking this out on you.
Okay.
You know that, correct? Hold on, pause.
Yes. Continue what you're saying. Continue what you're saying.
It's not the anomaly when some of these teams in the same regions are playing one another. And let's take the conferences and the logos out of it. Let's say the ACC was doing that to the SEC. We would make the same on Jesus, God Almighty, I would make the same argument. The games are being played on the field, Joe, and teams are losing, and the conferences that are holding all of this up should not have the power that they do. We're expanding, in my humble opinion, as Greg Sankey just said in SEC spring meetings, because they don't want to come to the table and accept the deal. I mean, he's saying it, not me.
Wait, what deal? What are you talking about?
Greg Sankey says it took a while for the other conferences to come back and propose alternate models, as they did in a meeting with us last week. The Big 12 ACC combined proposed a 4-4-3-3-1 model, as Yahoo Sports reported per Ross Dellinger. Greg Sankey states, I don't think it would be me at the podium if some of those ideas were adopted. Meaning he would get fired.
Okay.
Because again, the problem is that they're trying to come together. They all have an equal vote. Tony Batiti.
Well, wait, hold on. That's not even true, though. They do not have an equal vote. The SEC and the Big Ten, that was one of the biggest changes with the college football playoff, that it was agreed upon that they would hold the majority of the power in the decision making. That is why that this model was completely shut down and didn't make it very far.
That sounds good in logic. What is playing out in reality?
They're the ones who created the 4-4-2-1 model or 2-2-1 model. And the whole point with this, Blake, that I've always been perplexed by this
three at large. Pause. In it, three at large.
4-4-2-2-1, and then there's
three at large
for the 16-team playoff.
Right. But I have said that.
That was created by the Big Ten and the SEC. What I've always been really confused by when you and I have this conversation is that what the SEC and the Big Ten have created with that model favors them. It favors them extremely heavily because they get 4 teams in, and then as we have discussed in the past, they will probably occupy most of the at-large. The ACC and the Big Ten will not occupy any of the at-large teams.
I'm saying that they should. The Big Ten and SEC should. You're saying that they don't have an equal vote. Then why don't we have the proposed model accepted? Explain to me this. If they don't have an equal vote, why are they acting like they do for the proposed model?
Because it's part of the conversation.
Ross, this is not a shot at Ross. Ross can report that, but Greg Sankey's literally saying that we're having meetings and proposing this, and we can't come to an agreement. Correct?
No, they've come to an agreement. They allowed for the other conferences to have a say.
They have a say, and they're not agreeing to it. That's the point. They're negotiating.
But we all know, we all know at the end of the day, though, that it's going to end up being that 4-4-2-2-1 model because, again, the SEC and the ACC and the Big 12 have no power to shut it down. They have none. They can only pitch options and ideas.
I'm glad you brought that up. And that's the topic that we're going to get to in just a moment in reference to they're about to just throw their weight around. Are they not?
Okay. Yeah.
Correct? I mean, because based off of what we're going to talk about with the SEC and Big Ten fighting the NCAA, they're done. Greg Sankey's taking a machete to the podium right now.
Yeah, this is a seminal moment.
Am I wrong?
Right. And we're going to get to that. And I know that that's like a really important inflection point for the sport. I have one final point that I want to bring up with this.
Okay, let's bring it up.
My biggest problem with this whole debate that we keep having and the arguments that you're presenting.
Yes.
If we had a season where the SEC was mostly 9-3 teams, say there was only one 10-2. Yeah. Say there was only one 10-2 team and the rest were 9-3 and or worse. Okay. Say most of them had worse records. Okay.
Okay.
If we had a year, say this upcoming season, where you had 11 win seasons, which this is possible. This is very possible with the scheduling now in the ACC. If you had a season where Miami, Florida State, Clemson, and let's say like North Carolina was 10-2, just throwing that out hypothetically, I'd be willing to bet on the final bracket show we would be sitting here arguing, and you would be arguing that those 11-1 seasons are not as competitive as the 9-3, 10-2 seasons in the SEC.
But you agree to that literally in the beginning of the segment. If we want to rewind the tape, these schedules are not created equally. You're right. If we rolled out a schedule like Texas, and Texas was 10-2, hold on.
Everything off of. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
If we're making the argument, and Texas had the schedule that they did, and they lost to all ranked opponents that they played, fine. Let's have the discussion. But it's also not the reality. And why not accept the 3 at-large bids then?
Wait, what do you mean? What about what does the large come into this that you're bringing that up?
Because if you have that many teams that are good and you think that you're a good conference and you're going to a 16-team playoff and there's 3 at large, go take it. Go take it. But here's the problem with that. If that's a one-year anomaly, then it's a one-year anomaly. They've been getting their asses kicked for 2 decades.
The version of the current version of the sport is extremely different than what it was for the last 2 decades. And I think that we're not even close to understanding which teams will be the best teams in the sport.
What conferences in the NIL era have won the national titles? What 2 conferences?
Actually, it's been mostly the Big Ten.
No, it hasn't. Alabama, 2020.
2021 was the first year that
2020 was the first year that NIL got enacted. That July 1st of 2020. You can look that up too. Please, I'll go 3 for 3 on you today.
That one's not true. Wait.
Want to bet?
That was when the rule changed. That was when the rule was
presented. The Ed O'Bannon case went through on July 1st of 2020 during COVID. Yes, it did.
All I'm sitting here and remembering is that like Bo Nix was one of the first people to get a bunch of NIL deals.
What class was Bo Nix?
He was at. No, this isn't right. That's not right. That's not right. It was 2021. All right, we're arguing over the semantics of that. Go ahead.
Regardless, then it's 2. Okay, then it's 2 and 2. Regardless, it doesn't matter. You're right. We're fighting over semantics. It's 2 and 2.
I think that as we've seen the rise of especially brands in the ACC, that Florida State has shown that they can throw money around, that Miami has shown that they can throw money around, that Clemson is now showing that they are willing to spend money, even though that they tried not to initially. There is a capability for the ACC to produce for the top teams in the country every single year. There's a possibility for that to happen. Like, regardless of who they're playing. The problem is that they play a shit schedule because the conference is top heavy, which is fine to argue. But, like, are we going to sit here and argue that when we're putting together a bracket?
Tom, sounds good. I got the best solution to flip this segment over to Notre Dame. You ready?
Okay.
You went 0-3 against the conferences that you're arguing about. Your champion went 0 for 3. Your champion right now, I'm going to say 0-7. I think it might be 0-6 in the back of my mind. In the last 2 years, they're 0-6 against the SEC. 0-6. So again, you keep talking about your champion. Good for you. Good for you. But Joe, I mean, wins. Why aren't wins mattering?
Wins do matter, but if a team is good enough to win their conference championship, that should matter a lot. That should matter. That should matter. That should be a significant, because there's 2 teams that get in. Clemson showed that even though they didn't have a very good record, they were still well coached enough to put up a fight against Texas. They showed that. They showed that they were able to.
Texas put up fights against everybody. Joe,
I understand that, but they still.
Vanderbilt, Arizona State, Ohio State. We can't use Texas as the only anomaly.
I'm not using Texas. I'm just trying to point out that it's not a college basketball tournament. It's not a college baseball tournament where some team can get hot and play a million games.
Bids. If you win your tournament, you're in.
No. But my point is that you can't have a random team with a losing record go on a run, or like a mediocre record go on a run and get themselves into the playoff, the college football playoff. That doesn't happen.
Little Rock.
Yeah.
Hey, the Rhode Island Rams say hello.
Okay, all right. Don't disrespect the boys. You have to. It requires a lot of successful performances in order to get to